Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. We're located at 4700 Grover Avenue. Our forums are usually at noon, and they're free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Today, Dr. Jack Agarwal, who is a professor of electrical engineering at University of Texas, will introduce our speaker. Dr. Agarwal.
I am delighted to introduce my colleague. Gary is very well known in the department and very well known for his contributions to the department. He is a Archie Strayton fellowship holder. He graduated from Rensselaer. And he is a person who is working on solar car, and he is the solar car team advisor, and he looks after the team, and he's very much involved in this overall competition, which is going to be held in July at the F1 racetrack. And it may become, almost from what I understand from him, a permanent avenue where the race will be held every year for a while. And it is a pleasure to introduce Professor Gary Hallock. He's going to tell us about the solar car and all the team and the competition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. I've got a microphone. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. This morning, I would like to talk with you about a group of UT students who design, build, and race full-size cars that are powered by nothing but sunshine. This is an outline of what I'd like to talk with you about. First of all, just kind of what is a solar car in our context, the student design work. A little bit about solar car racing with a Y, where ourselves compete against teams from across the country, Canada, and really around the world that do the same thing. Then I'd like to move into some of the technical challenges and actually how one can actually design a solar car. And then, as already been mentioned, we've got a couple of exciting events coming up this summer, both a track race and a cross-country rally. So first of all, the solar car is an electric vehicle, and it's kind of neat to kind of look at the history of electric vehicles and, in fact, realize that they span 3 centuries. And in fact, basically, back in the 1800s, when the electric motor was invented and sort of reasonable batteries became available, people put them on a vehicle and made it go. The credit generally for the first electric car goes back to 1837. It was in Hungary, and it was basically a locomotive type that ran on rails and actually did a little bit of productive work. Things got going quite a bit stronger when the lead-acid battery was developed, and this is a battery that has survived those 3 centuries and is still the battery that we use to start our ordinary vehicles. And it's interesting that at the turn of the century, 38% of the vehicles on the road in the U.S. were electric-powered. And there were electric taxis, there were very plush electric vehicles. There were all kinds of things, recharging stations, on and on. But most of us, of course, have lived most of our lives in the 20th century, which saw the decline of the electric vehicle. And, of course, that's done for reasons that you all know. Worldwide discoveries of petroleum, the improving road system that required more range than the electric vehicle could provide, and also improvements in the gasoline engine. Big ones were like the electric starter and the muffler really helped. So 20th century really saw the decline of electric vehicles, but now it's perking up again. And there's a lot of commercial products available, and this is all driven by a whole different set of criteria. Things like pollution and global warming and political stability of oil-producing countries, and also technology, that maybe we can finally do it and be competitive with the gasoline industry. I'm going to make a few comments about the Chevy Volt during my talk, kind of analogy with our work. That's a hybrid. There's also a number of pure electrics out there. And in fact, pretty much all the big auto manufacturers are either involved or getting involved with electric vehicles. The other part of our work is the solar part. And this is an extraordinarily busy slide, which I'm only going to point out a couple of things on it. It's put out by the National Renewable Energy Lab and talks about the sort of the history of solar cells. Solar cells have a much more recent history. I don't know if you can read this down here, but it starts at 1975, so like 40 years ago. Generally, RCA is credited with inventing the first commercially viable solar cell. What this is a plot of is time versus efficiency of a solar cell. So efficiency meaning the fraction or the amount of the incident light that can actually be converted to electricity and then used. And you see for all these curves kind of a march up to the right as technology has improved. Our main interest for the work I'll be talking about today is the blue, kind of in the middle. Those are silicon cells, and the best available now are about 21%, 22% efficient. So they can convert about 1/5 of the sunlight into electricity. There's a lot of other technologies, some more efficient, some less efficient. The thing that this graph doesn't talk about is the cost. And of course, in the renewable energy area, you're very interested in the cost as well, the dollar per watt. So there's a lot of competing technologies, and one, of course, has to look at the cost as well. So one more slide on solar cells. What I'll be talking about are silicon solar cells. They are by far the most popular. 95% of the cells produced today are silicon. There is no problem at all with the material. Silicon is available in vast quantities on the Earth. Really second most abundant element in the Earth's crust, the most abundant being oxygen. Solar cells, there's a lot of technology out there. Besides silicon, they can be made of multiple material. Gallium arsenide, for example, is very important, so two materials. These are more efficient and often used on like space satellites. And there are thin films, often complex brews of material, tend to be a little less efficient, but there's a lot of work to make them very, very cost effective. In addition to using multiple materials, they also don't have to be simple in construction. You can also make a sort of a pancake structure of cells of different types, again with the goal of capturing more sunlight and turning it into electricity. This shows an ingot of pure silicon. Pure silicon is a shiny gray metal. And one thing that's kind of amazing about this is it's a meter long and it's a single crystal. And therein really lies the cost of a solar cell. It's in the processing, not the materials. It's very analogous to making computer chips, like in our cell phones and laptops. A lot of processing of very pure substances is required, clean room type work. So let me talk now about a solar car. So in our context, in our competition, a solar cell, first of all, is a full-size electric vehicle. It is powered only by an onboard solar array, typically covering the surface of the vehicle. And it is built mainly by universities around the world, which get together periodically and face off and find out who has the best bragging rights in terms of the best solar car. So the components of a solar car look basically like this. There is, of course, the solar array. That then drives an electric motor, typically a fairly small electric motor, maybe 5 or 10 horsepower. Also, typically a very high-tech electric motor actually built into the wheel assembly of the car. Electric motors do not necessarily require things like transmissions and lots of gears to transfer their energy. Big plus. We also do have a battery bank. The battery bank being used to store energy because, of course, the solar car is going to need to drive through clouds and things like that. And so sometimes we need to supply energy from a battery bank. But in terms of the competition, once the competition starts, you can never plug your battery bank into the wall. Battery bank has to get recharged through the solar array. There's also, of course, a body. We typically build bodies out of carbon fiber or Kevlar and/or Kevlar, and lots of mechanical bits, as you would find in a car. Typically, the solar cars are made using a space frame, this aluminum structure here, and it has all the ordinary things, steering, of course, suspension, that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and pass around a solar cell. It's about 1/3 of a millimeter thick. This is a bare, pure solar cell ready to be used. It's about as fragile as a potato chip. And usually when I do this, like from my class at UT, I say the goal is to pass it all around the room without breaking it. But if it does break, that's fine. This is a Kevlar box that stores the batteries for our most recent solar car called TechSun. The box is very strong and light. This is a sample of the material. It's Kevlar on both sides and paper honeycomb in the middle. And I promise you this is not fragile. You may try as hard as you like to break this, and I will pass it around as well. Okay, so a little bit about the competition. The very first solar car racing was actually across Australia back in 1987. Basically north to south, all across Australia, over 2,000 miles. Back then, there was more industry involved. Mostly it's university stuff now, but occasionally in the World Solar Challenge, which is still held, sometimes industry gets involved kind of to push their technology a little bit. World Solar Challenge is still the premier solar car race. The last one was just a few months ago, back in October, and it was won by a solar car team back from the Netherlands. They call themselves Nuon. They raced all the way across Australia and achieved an average speed of over 55 miles an hour in their solar car. Solar car racing in the United States began just a few years after that. And it was also, the U.S. racing was actually sponsored by General Motors. They did it for a number of years. It's called the GM Sun Race. It was pretty much across the United States. It went from Florida to Michigan. UT, in fact, participated in that race. and came out 22 out of 32 entries. So, starting to talk a little bit about UT. So, the university has been involved for quite some time, since 1988. And we have, in fact, built 6 solar cars, named as indicated here. I will primarily today talk about the last 2, Texon, our latest car, and Samsung Solarian, called Samsung Solarian because they gave us huge funding to build the car, so we named the car after them. This photo here shows a picture of the original UT solar car, Texas native son. And here they're racing it. This was really before I got involved, but they're racing it somewhere in California. And they got a second place finish in one of the races. So there's a happy UT student. Okay, so let's move on just a little bit and talk about the technical challenge. What does it take to actually do this? So by far, the biggest technical challenge is the limited power that's available from a solar array that is small enough to fit on a car. So if you were to go outside, and it's sort of been on and off, cloudy and sunny this morning, but it looks sunny now. If you were to go outside in the sun and actually measure the power that is hitting the surface of the Earth, you would find that it's about 1,000 watts per meter squared. So that's basically what one has to work with. For our solar car, you can fit maybe about 6 square meters of cells on the surface of the vehicle, and that pretty much makes it, full size, pretty big car. Typically 5 meters long and 1.6 meters wide. So, roughly speaking, 6 square meters. And as I talked about a few slides ago, the best silicon cells have maybe 21, 22% efficiency. So if we use 21% here, we end up with about 1,200 watts of power available. That is less than 2 horsepower, so that is not a huge amount of power to provide propulsion to a full-size vehicle. And in fact, that could barely run your home hairdryer that you might have in your bathroom. Okay, it is not a huge amount of power. So that's a really big technical challenge in doing this. There are others. The cars must meet strict safety requirements. They do go out on the highway and interact with other vehicles and so forth, and we certainly want to keep our students safe. And the cars must be able to drive at normal speeds on regular highways, okay, for the cross-country event. They can't really, slow everybody down and that sort of thing. These cars are typically not driven on like I-35 class roads. That would be, kind of deadly. But still, 55, 65 mile an hour roads are acceptable, but just not, I-35. Okay, so how can one design something like this? So key components, we have the aerodynamics, the body design. We have the mechanical parts, suspension, chassis, steering, things like that I mentioned. And, of course, lots of electrical. Solar array, motors, batteries, electronics. Our cars are full of computers, just like today's cars. One of the neat things about this project at the university is how interdisciplinary it is. That we have mechanical engineering students and aerospace students often like to get involved with the body and the aerodynamics part. And, of course, lots of electrical engineering students that work together, learn aspects of each other's projects and so forth, and kind of make the whole thing come together. So very interdisciplinary, really provides an opportunity for the students that they just can't get. Certainly not in an ordinary classroom, and even in our labs, don't really get this. So I talked a little bit about the power that we have, 1,200 watts. I'd like to now talk about where that power goes. And so that is my next slide here. And there is actually an equation here. I'm not going to show very many equations in this talk, but just a couple. I am an engineer, after all. I've got to show a couple of equations. So in talking about where we have to put the power, aerodynamic drag is one of the big ones. And that starts to get significant once the solar car is traveling above about 25 miles an hour or so. What I've shown here is the fundamental equation for aerodynamic drag of basically a body, an object moving through a fluid. And so the left-hand side is the force that it takes to push the body through the fluid. There's the air density here. Basically, the fluid density comes in. The velocity comes in. It comes in as velocity squared. Okay, so the higher the speed, the higher the force that you need. And then this term on the right, this A C sub D, that's really depending on the shape of the car and its size. Okay, C sub D is the drag coefficient. And of course, one wants to try to minimize that, to take the least amount of force to propel the car. So for example, this bit here tries to illustrate a flat plate going through the air, and that's not very aerodynamic, has a drag coefficient of 2. So it's hard to push a big flat plate through the air. On the other hand, this illustrates an airfoil, and an airfoil is a very aerodynamic structure. It's about 50 times better in a smaller drag coefficient. You can probably barely see this, but that's a dolphin. And a dolphin moves through a much heavier fluid, water. And a dolphin is very streamlined, in fact, has quite a low drag coefficient. So this is basically the fundamental physics that drives our aerodynamic aspect. And there's one more little bit, and that is there's a basic engineering equation for power. That power is given by the force, which I showed you on the last slide, times the velocity. So what's shown right here is that same equation that I had on the last slide, except that the velocity squared here, if you can see that, has gone from a 2 to a 3, velocity cubed. Okay? So the actual power that we need to propel our solar car is proportional to the velocity cubed. And that's quite important because that's telling us that if we want the car to go twice as fast, then 2 cubed is 8. It takes 8 times the power to propel it. Okay? So it's really, really hard to make things go fast from a power point of view. And so things like jet planes, Formula One race cars, very, very streamlined, minimize that drag coefficient to go fast. And even our solar car here. Okay? We need to make it streamlined to minimize the amount of power that we have to use in aerodynamic drag. The second big consumption of power is mechanical drag. These are the two biggies in terms of propulsion. Mechanical drag is fundamentally based on friction. Here's a basic equation for that, and I'm only going to show really two or three basic equations. We're getting close to the end here. The force that we need is proportional to some coefficient, it's called C here, times the second term, which is basically the weight of the vehicle. And back when you maybe had a college physics course or even high school, you might have learned that if you have a block and you push that block, it takes a force, and that force depends on the friction and also the weight of the block. Heavier block is harder to push. So that's the fundamental physics. The thing is, in a vehicle, it's a lot more complicated because we're not, thankfully, doing that. We've got a lot of rolling systems, okay, wheels and bearings and that sort of thing to do a lot better, okay, than just pushing a mass. However, that gets very complicated in the sense that there's effect from the tires, there's effect from bearings, there's a effect from maybe your calipers are slightly touching your rotors, just on and on. And it's hard to come up with a sort of a fundamental equation that describes all of that in one simple way. So what is generally done is something that's basically an empirical formula. Empirical formula means, well, we don't really understand it, but it works. Okay? It fits the data. It basically shows, gives us an analytical way to analyze what we are producing from an engineering point of view. And what it does is it has a lot of aspects of this fundamental equation. Note that W here, it's changed to W in this equation, is the weight of the car. And it's still got this coefficient, CRR, times 1 times the weight. But the new thing that's in it is a velocity dependence. So generally, mechanical drag in a vehicle also does have a velocity dependence. Okay, it's higher as the car speeds up. So we have this empirical formula that we can also use to look at the power that our vehicle requires. And that's going to depend on the weight of the car and its speed. Once more, to turn that equation, which was expressed in force on the last slide, into power, we multiply by velocity. Okay? So this is that same equation that I showed on the previous slide, except that there's been a bit of unit conversions. It's kind of mixed, not all in SI units. But still, it's basically an equation, and it's got the weight of the car and the velocity in it a couple times. One really important contributor is, in fact, the tires. They provide a lot of the mechanical drag. In fact, it's one of the reasons why trains are so efficient in moving freight. And I'm sure most of you listen to NPR. You may have heard that sponsorship blurb that they have about how efficient a train is in moving freight. 500 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel, that kind of thing, ton of freight. And that's because trains basically have steel wheels against a steel track. And that is very efficient, very low rolling resistance. Our cars tend to have rubber, fairly sticky, and against asphalt, much worse. So tires are a big contributor. They're not the only contributor, but they're very important in terms of vehicle power use. So let's put this together. How can we build a solar car? As far as the body goes, we need to make it very streamlined, very low aerodynamic drag. We need to make it lightweight. We use a lot of carbon fiber, a lot of Kevlar, like I passed around. The mechanicals, we tend to use a lot of aluminum. Our chassis and roll cage is made of heat-treated aluminum. It's very, very strong. Almost all solar cars have 3 wheels. So I mentioned, tires being such a big contributor to mechanical drag. Well, if we can get rid of 1 tire, we do a lot better. That introduces a lot of stability issues, so there has to be a lot of modeling that goes on to actually make this work. Electrical-wise, we use high-efficiency solar cells. We use a very efficient low-power electric motor. The motor on our latest car is 5 horsepower continuous and 10 horsepower peak. And also, the best batteries that are available, which are lithium technology. The cars are very light. Our latest car weighs 475 pounds total without the driver. And our car before that was 600 pounds. So this is a factor of 5 to 10 lighter than the ordinary vehicles that we drive around. It must be very light. So let's look at some numbers and see how this can, in fact, be made to work. So what is being plotted on this chart is, first of all, speed in the leftmost column. So we're starting out at 10 miles an hour, 20, 30, going up to 60 miles an hour. And then in the next two columns, I am giving the numbers for the aerodynamic drag that we talked about and the mechanical drag that we discussed. Note that, 10 miles an hour, the aerodynamic drag is almost nothing, where at 60 miles an hour, it's really large. That's that V-cube dependence that we talked about, strong increase with velocity. This gives the mechanical drag. It starts out at around 100 watts, but it goes up much more slowly, okay, because it has a much weaker dependence on velocity. There is some velocity dependence. These numbers are for Solarian, not our latest solar car. We don't have all that worked out quite yet. The last column, the fourth column, sums the two. So starting out at 10 miles an hour at about 100 watts. Now, that's not the entire power. It does take some power to run the computers and radios and things like that. But really, that's pretty minimal. And all of those systems are very carefully designed to minimize power. Okay? Lots of arguments amongst the students when they're designing it. Can I have a few watts here? Can I have a few watts there? No. Figure out another way to do it. That kind of thing. So you see that as the speed goes up, the power goes up. And note a point somewhere between 40 and 50 miles an hour where the power that we need to propel the car is matching our array output of 1,200 watts. And so that's going to define the speed that the car can travel pretty much on level ground in bright sunshine without using any energy from the battery and could just be sustained all day under those conditions. We do have the battery pack, so if the car needs to go up a hill, which of course it will always have to do at some point, you can draw energy from the battery bank, but then you have to perhaps slow down a little bit and replenish that energy. So this for Solarian is like between 40 and 50 miles an hour. Our new car, we think, is going to be somewhat better than that, maybe even into the 50 miles an hour. And as I already mentioned, the World Solar Challenge winner got all the way across Australia with an average speed over 55 miles an hour. I'll go through the next couple of slides fairly fast. I mainly want to illustrate some of the work that the students do. This sort of shows an overall view of the electrical system. Again, like some of the messy earlier slides, I'll just spend a minute or so on it. Battery bank in the middle. The battery bank parameters, temperature, and things like that are to multiple computer systems. There is telemetry that's either sent to another vehicle by radio or, in the case of a track race, to the pit, so other students can be monitoring exactly what the car's doing and tell the driver, slow down, burning up too much energy, or you can go a little faster, that kind of thing. These are the solar arrays. The solar arrays on our last two cars were divided up into 3 separate subarrays, just groups of the cells, for redundancy or in case one part of the car gets shadowed, maybe by the canopy temporarily, that you can get maximum power. There is a bit of power electronics that takes the output of the array and kind of conditions it to the voltage that's needed by the battery, whatever state it is, or the electric motor. There's also a fairly complex piece of power electronics that converts the DC battery voltage into the electric pulses that are needed to drive this fairly sophisticated high-efficiency motor. Pretty much all of these subsystems now have been designed by the UT students. This shows one example. So this is meant to illustrate our battery bank, individual cells. They have built little modules to monitor the health of these battery modules. They then communicate over a computer bus to a master system, again, another type of computer that collects that information and then sends it to an additional computer. First on board the solar car, then through telemetry to a more full-size computer. This picture shows some of the circuit boards that the students have built. They are sophisticated circuit boards with surface mount components. The students actually put the parts on and solder them up under a microscope, kind of neat. And I have an example of one of their circuit boards I'd also like to pass around. Not fragile at all. Okay, let me move on to talking about a couple of other technical aspects. Very key here, both to our work and electric vehicles in general, are batteries. So I'd like to present to you just a couple of key ideas behind batteries. This chart shows different battery technologies. And what's plotted here is the energy storage per unit weight, watt-hours per kilogram. That's really the most important for a moving vehicle. How much energy per unit weight can you store for some different technologies? This is our lead-acid battery that I've already mentioned that we still use in our cars. Survived many centuries. Is quite highly developed at this point. It has a value of about 40 watt-hours per kilogram. Nickel cadmium are not used so much because of the toxicity of the cadmium. Nickel metal hydride are quite popular, often used in our non-plug-in hybrid vehicles. And you can see they store more than double the amount of energy as the lead acid. But the really state-of-the-art stuff is the lithium technology, lithium batteries. And that's what we also have in our cell phones and laptops and so forth. You see they're much higher. There are multiple different types of lithium batteries, the most powerful of which is the cobalt technology, lithium cobalt. And I've kind of enhanced this a little bit because the chart was a bit out of date. They're now above 200 watt-hours per kilogram. Okay, so like 5 times better than our lead acids. So the highest energy cobalt lithium-ion batteries can store about 200 watt-hours per kilogram. But it's really important to keep in mind that the energy density of gasoline is about 12,000 watt-hours per kilogram. And it's still really hard to compete with gasoline in terms of battery storage. So you see a factor of 60 here. And hence, we still have limited range of our, especially our pure electric vehicles. So I said I was going to make a bit of connection, and I will in the next couple of slides, to the what you could actually buy, like for example the Chevy Volt. They actually use manganese technology. For our latest solar car, Texon, we're using phosphate technology. There are reasons for that. This is the most powerful of the batteries, but it's also the most fragile. And if you have a laptop and its battery has managed to last 3 years without kind of dying as soon as you pull out the charger, you know the effects that although these are very, very good batteries, there are some advantages to some of the other lithium technologies. So in our latest solar car, we are using the phosphate technology, about 100 watt-hours per kilogram. And we've got 504 of these in our solar car. And I'm going to go ahead and pass around one of our solar car batteries. So one question that one might ask is, if we got into cloud cover, or if it rained, you probably can't see this too well, but it always seems to rain during solar car events, especially the cross-country ones somewhere. So it's pouring rain out here. With our battery pack, we can store about 4 kilowatt hours. We talked a few minutes ago about the 1,200 watts that the array can produce. So if we ask the question, how long could the battery pack do what the solar array does? You can divide our battery capacity by the solar array, and you get a bit over 3 hours. Okay? So we could drive our car, again, flat, kind of level ground, for a bit over 3 hours on batteries alone. Let me make a connection to the Chevy Volt that you could actually buy. So the Chevy Volt, as I mentioned, uses manganese technology, also a fairly rugged lithium technology. They use a much larger battery than we do, about 4 times, 16 kilowatt hours. But the electronics in the car is only designed to actually extract about 9 of those 16. And that's another way to extend the lifetime of the vehicle. Of the battery pack, to not use all its energy. Here's kind of the neat thing. That 9.4 kilowatt hours, or 34 megajoules, has the gasoline equivalent of about 1 quart in the Chevy Volt of gasoline. 1 quart. So you ask, well, how can they manage a 35-mile electric range with the equivalent of 1 quart of gasoline? There's one more thing that comes into this, and that is that gasoline engines are not very efficient. Okay? They'll waste actually up to about 75% of their power as heat. So actually this 0.26 gasoline equivalent energy from the Volt is really worth about 3 times that much when powering an efficient electric motor. So let's call it like 3/4 of a gallon. So this vehicle, to get a 35-mile range with that 3/4 of a gallon equivalent, needs about 45 miles to the gallon. And as you know, compact car, lots of aluminum, high tech, that's achievable. Okay? So this whole bottom thing is my numbers, not anything from GM, but roughly speaking, that's how they can do it, how the technology can work. So back to the solar car, here's our array. So I mentioned we tend to have, this is a top view of the solar car. The front has a subarray, and then left and right sides have subarrays. This is a picture of that power tracker I showed in the electrical diagram. This is the device that actually converts the electrical output of the array to the electrical signal that's usable by the electrical power that's usable by the solar car. This is a commercial unit. And actually, this semester, we had a project where the students finally designed our own power trackers. So we were very close to having now designed everything. Okay, so let me move into the very last part of my presentation and talk with you about the competition. The cross-country event is called the American Solar Challenge. It's held every 2 years. We did not participate in 2012. We were in the middle of designing our new solar car. That race was from the 2010 one that we did participate in, was from Oklahoma to just outside Chicago And here's our Solarian car starting the race and underway. Here, I think, was an afternoon, finished racing, trying to replenish the battery pack for a couple hours before the sun went down. There's the car entering, I think, Route 66, somewhere in the middle of the country, right there. That's George, one of our drivers. So, in this place, in Missouri, the students drove the solar car over some rough railroad tracks. The students that actually saw it said the back of the car came about a foot off the ground, came crashing down. I don't know if that's really true or not. But the car certainly did come crashing down. And these are our batteries in here. And they managed to basically separate these batteries from its circuit board. And the whole car started working really, really badly. So this is part of the challenge for the students as well. We're sort of out in the middle of nowhere. We've got our support trailer and any tools and voltmeters and things that the students thought to bring along. And it's sort of, okay, guys, fix the solar car, we'll get back into the competition. And so that's exactly what they did. Really excellent training for the students. Work quickly, figure out what's wrong, take things apart, and fix it. And this is the finish of the solar car race outside of Chicago. And this student's name is Benton, and he was really happy to have that race finished. This is the track race called the Formula Sun Grand Prix. It was held this past summer, last June, at the brand new COTA track that we have here in Austin. And about a dozen teams came down and spent a week basically together and qualifying and racing for 3 days on the brand new COTA track. This shows our solar car here. That's our new one, Texan, racing against 2 other teams. Not quite, loud Formula One 200-mile-an-hour stuff. This is really, really, really quiet, silent, 50-mile-an-hour racing on the track, but still really exciting. So a couple of real quick stories about that. Our car, Texan, was brand new, virtually no testing except for sort of parking lot type stuff. And part of getting into the race is a braking test. So the cars do have to qualify for the track race, just like any other racing type event. This is our lead mechanical student here. His name is Raul. There were a bit of misdesigns on clearances and parts and so forth in the back of the car, mechanical systems. And to get into the race, you have to pass this rather severe braking test. And so we tried 2 or 3 times, and at one point we managed to totally warp the back brake rotor. It was warped, hugely, big wiggles. Totally unusable. It's the night before the last qualifications. Everybody dearly wants to get into the race. And so once again, the students get together and brainstorm, how are we going to do this? And eventually they managed to call other people. I think it was SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, found a rotor that they could make work. And then the students went back to our shop and throughout the entire night remachined parts to get the car back. And this illustrates a very tired UT student that week. And so fortunately, we were able to qualify our new car. One other quick little story, real short. This is Cynthia. Cynthia is one of our really energetic students, also was a driver for this event. Cynthia is not the tallest person in the world. And this is a race official back here. Part of qualifying for the race is visibility. And the race officials will have these signs, like with arrows or numbers, and the drivers have to be able to identify that. Well, Cynthia couldn't quite do that, but she was very involved from the beginning with our carbon fiber construction. All the students were very busy fixing various things. Cynthia went back to our shop, and overnight, once again, she built herself a custom booster seat out of carbon fiber and came back the next day, and with her booster seat was able to qualify as one of our solar car drivers. So I will finish up here. We do have 2014 events, 2 events coming up this summer, really exciting. And the great thing is they are right here in Austin. So Formula Sun Grand Prix, the track event, is returning to COTA. And we will have a public day on July 19th. And you all can come out, see the solar cars racing, see them finish the race, walk around the entire place. It's not going to be very crowded, probably 1,500 people or so, free admission. This is also a year for the cross-country event, and we're going to go ahead. That's going to be from Austin to Minnesota, and that race is going to start right on the UT campus. And we would welcome you to come out. That will be Monday, July 21st, and help send off the teams, of which we have 29 registered. So let me, last but not least, just put a slide up of our many sponsors. This is expensive, really expensive to build these solar cars and race them cross-country. And we very much appreciate all of our generous sponsors that make this project at UT possible. So thank you.
Do you, for your drivers, do you breed them especially small, like horse jockeys?
So, the regulations require that each solar car driver be a minimum of 80 kilograms. So, lighter drivers, for example, Cynthia, have a ballast bag, typically stainless steel shot or pennies or something like that, a bag. It's all very carefully done. They get a color-coded wristband that gets put on their arm by the officials in their bag. And so when they hop in the car to take a turn of driving during the race, they must bring their ballast bag with them. So 80 kilograms. So some of the drivers indeed are above 80 kilograms, and that's just fine with the officials.
Anyway, two suggestions. Okay. You thought about putting a little wind turbine on your vehicle. Like this movie, you actually generate a little bit of electricity. And also, you thought about concentrated solar. I read that can actually increase, the weight of that. Maybe concentrated solar will give you a little bit more bang for your...
Yep. When I showed that early slide talking about solar cell development, all the stuff at the top in efficiency was concentrated arrays. And so solar concentration, indeed, is a technique to not only increase power, but increase efficiency of an array. Nobody has quite figured out how to do that on a solar car. There is a lot of restrictions, including sort of a box, a parallelepiped that the solar car must fit into. So you are kind of limited, and nobody's quite figured out how to put Fresnel lenses and things like that to do it. But I'm sure the kids are thinking about it. In terms of the turbine kind of thing, once again, there's a lot of rules that we're under as far as sizes and so forth and space that we have available. And of course, also, if you're just generating the wind by your propulsion, it would be a net loss. Okay, so there's that issue as well.
Tell me what I'm missing. You're able to power the car with the power of a hair dryer?
Yes.
I don't believe that.
Well, please come out this summer and see the cars on the track. It is pretty phenomenal.
Thank you for such an interesting presentation. My question is, what do you estimate the miles per kilowatt hour
Well, so if let's go a little high. Let's call it 60 miles an hour. So that's a mile a minute. And I mentioned that we could go for 3 hours. So consider a mile a minute and 3 hours of driving as somewhat of a answer to that question. You're asking how. I'm sorry. State your question once more.
It's to miles per gallon.
Miles per gallon.
No, it's analogous to miles per gallon. On a car like this, what do you estimate? Miles per kilowatt hour.
Miles per kilowatt hour.
Like analogous to miles per gallon. 50 miles per kilowatt hour.
Yes.
That's a pretty good number then. Do you think these have ever become a consumer product that you would just put a plug-in charger like this so you can drive your garage and charge the batteries at night and put in a bigger battery capacity?
Yeah, so when we're not in competition, and are just kind of showing the car and driving it around and don't want to kind of leave it out in the sun all day, we will typically plug it into the wall. So it's really the competition when all the energy has to come from the array. But sometimes it is very convenient simply to charge up our battery.
We're going to give Dr. Agarwal the last word here, a very brief question, and then we'll have to close.
That's great. You learned a lot.
The thing which I would like to know, given the path you are on or the technology curve, when do you think we can have one of these cars driving around to the grocery store?
Well, these cars, of course, are designed to be racing vehicles, single person, no air condition, no real storage for groceries and things like that. So not your practical car. We haven't, as far as our UT team, as far as our work, we've kind of focused on this aspect and not really looked at practical vehicles. The World Solar Challenge now has a separate class where they're kind of pushing in that way. What could you do that somebody might actually want to buy? And there are university folks that are looking in other directions, somewhat larger cars, maybe 4 wheels. How can you push the technology like that? If you just kind of scan the web, you can see all kinds of neat things that people have come up with. You're, of course, still governed by the engineering that we've talked about today in terms of the limited power available and have to be light and so forth. You can't really get around that. But, yeah, it's being worked on for sure.
I wish we had more time, but we're going to have to close. And this is very exciting. Thank you so much for being willing to come and talk with us. Give him a big hand.
Thank you.